Before Diary of a Wimpy Kid was a book series, it was published online. Here's a big list of all the stuff that was in the online version, but not in the books. My apologies in advance if I made any mistakes with this list, because I don't have all the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books memorized. On page 2, Greg explains he made a deal with Mom. If he writes in his diary, he gets out of one chore a week. That's why he's writing this diary. He doesn't want to clean the toilet. That's a pretty good explanation and a decent joke. Maybe it was removed from the first book because they didn't want to start the series with toilet humor. There are extra jokes in the scene where Roderick pranks Greg into getting ready for school in the middle of the night. Greg complains he doesn't like seeing Dad in his underwear, and he says if he really wanted to do something bad, he would pick something more exciting than eating Cheerios at night. Greg spends a page complaining he was called a nerd, which is wrong. He's clearly a wimp, not a nerd. Here's a somewhat long storyline which was in the online version. Greg's dad plans to send him to Bishop Garrigan High School. Greg doesn't want to go there because it's an all-boys school. He tries deleting an answering machine message from the school, but that doesn't work. For Christmas, everyone gives Greg clothes in the Bishop Garrigan school colors. Greg is finally saved from having to go to Bishop Garrigan's when Dad learns Roderick's loser bandmate Bill went there. Greg asks a girl named Christine to be his lab partner, but she says she already has one. He's annoyed when he learns she was lying to avoid him. Greg talks about slam books. He says he's never on the list of popular kids because the pages in the books are too short. Greg is pretty sure he would make the cut if the pages had 32 lines. Speaking of lines per page, the online version's pages are smaller than the books by about 5 lines. Greg has to rush home to prevent Mom from shutting off his video game system. That's because Twisted Wizard doesn't save your progress ever. It sounds like a terrible game to me. Greg has a second best friend named Colin. Greg mostly goes to Colin's house to play video games. In the books, the stories with Colin are changed to stories with Rowley. Roderick tells Greg that Dad uses a belt as punishment. Greg tries to stop that from happening, which confuses Dad. In the books, Greg reads Sherlock's Sammy. In the online version, Greg reads Encyclopedia Brown Does It Again, which has 12 short stories. I want to point out, that's wrong. All Encyclopedia Brown books have 10 short stories, not 12. Also, the name of the book in question is Encyclopedia Brown Strikes Again, not Encyclopedia Brown Does It Again. The other major storyline, which is exclusive to the online version, is Greg talking about his best friend Ben. They used to be best friends, but Ben moved away. The two of them liked to joke around at church during the sign of peace. One time, Ben brought actual peas to church. They both lost it. Ever since then, Mom has made them sit far apart from each other. Ben currently goes to St. Patrick's School with Greg's crush, Piper Matthews. In the book, Piper's name is Holly Hills, and she goes to the same school as Greg. When Greg asks Ben about Piper, Ben tells a bunch of embarrassing stories about her which make her look bad. Greg later sees Ben cozying up to Piper at a roller skating rink. He realizes Ben made up the embarrassing stories because Ben wanted Piper all to himself. So the next time Greg goes to confession at St. Patrick's, he says something to the priest in order to make Ben look bad. Greg complains about how boring and predictable sitcoms are. He makes a fake sitcom called Jerome, the Man with Incredibly Red Lips. Greg's Boy Who Thinks He's a Dog routine contains one extra scene where they make fun of Rowley for being overweight. On Columbus Day, Greg doesn't realize they have the day off of school, so he goes to the bus stop and waits a long time before he realizes the bus isn't coming. Manny's made-up word is Pootie. The book changes it to Ploopy. After Greg calls Manny a Pootie in church, Mom makes Greg go to confession. His story confuses the priest. Greg loses all interest in being student body treasurer when he learns meetings are during recess. He purposely sabotages his campaign by pretending he wants to buy school uniforms. Greg's soccer team has a large goalie named Ian. The other teams complain he's too big to be 12 years old, and they're right. Ian is later exposed as being 16 years old. Greg sees Dwight is copying off of his test. Greg purposely puts down wrong answers so Dwight will fail. On Halloween, Rowley doesn't know how to undo his night costume so he can go to the bathroom, so he's stuck for a long time until Grandma helps him out. Also on Halloween, Greg and Rowley hide at Colin's house, not Grandma's. Roderick has a different car. It's a half car, half truck. In the books, Roderick drives the band's van. In the online version, Bill owns the van. Dad goes to a city council meeting to suggest playing classical music all over town, just to annoy the teenagers. Roderick has a picture of himself with a woman in a bikini. In the online version, the story ends there. In book 4, there is a follow-up scene where Greg realizes Roderick's bikini girlfriend is a cardboard picture, not a real woman. Roderick and his friend make slips of paper with number 1 written on them, so they can pretend they were the first to arrive at parties. Mom tells Greg he will not be in the Wizard of Oz play because he's being punished. When she sees he likes the idea of not being in the play, she changes her mind and forces him to participate. Roderick purposely grosses Greg out by touching all the cereal. Roderick gives himself all the marshmallows in the cereal box. Greg's okay with that because he once got sick from eating old candies at Grandma's. Mom videotaped Greg's potty training. Why, Mom? The Wizard of Oz play ends with the trees not singing. It's much funnier in the book, where the play ends with a big food fight. At Thanksgiving, Grandpa gets in trouble for smoking a cigar in the bathroom. There are some changes to Book 4's fish storyline. Manny has his own fish, and the 3 fish live in the same tank the entire time. Dad gets tired of seeing Roderick's fish, so he pretends it's dead and flushes it down the toilet. Grandpa confesses he killed Dad's cat by leaving it out in the cold overnight. In the book, he kills the cat by running it over with his car. Dad helps Greg make a booby trap to catch the person who's stealing junk food. When Greg discovers Dad is the snack thief, they talk for a bit. Dad says it's really Mom's fault that he's stealing the family's junk food. I have to say, that sounds a lot like a complaint Greg would make. Mom walks in on them talking, and Greg takes the blame for everything. Greg wrestles a boy named Stinky Williams in gym class. In the book, it's Fregley. Greg's mom forces him to make Christmas cards, but she lets him stop when she sees they're not nice. Greg's parents try to give him the Santa talk, but he always avoids it, so they purposely wrap presents in front of him on Christmas Eve. Greg has an Aunt Mary Lou, who doesn't know which kid is which. She thinks Greg is Roderick, and she has no idea who Roderick is. Greg complains the game Twisted Wizard Black is dumb, because you have to constantly mash buttons to run, and now his thumbs hurt. Roderick gets a model rocket for Christmas. He and Dad have a lot of fun building it. They lose it in the woods. Greg finds it in a tree, but he accidentally trips and smashes it. Roderick proposes a serve your brother breakfast in bed contest. Greg's turn lasts for 23 days. When it's Roderick's turn, he gives up on the first day. A kid named Ralph spends an hour trying to open a hockey puck. Rowley's on the swim team too. There are jokes about Greg's racing-style swimsuit, which is just a bikini. Rowley's babysitter is fired for smoking. Instead of Mom accidentally embarrassing Greg by showing up at school in her gym clothes, Dad purposely embarrasses Greg by showing up at school with weird sunglasses. The swim coach says they can end practice early if everyone swims across the whole pool without taking a breath. The best swimmer on the team is a jerk who fails on purpose. The book changes Dungeons and Dragons to Magic and Monsters. Rowley plays with Greg's characters when Greg isn't around. The characters are killed by a booby-trapped treasure chest. Greg is so mad he chases Rowley with a stick. Greg almost falls into a mud puddle, where a mean kid purposely makes Greg fall. There's a similar scene in Diary of an Awesome Friendly Kid, where Rowley accidentally makes Greg fall. Greg's boring botany teacher, Mr. Peters, gets mentioned a few times. When Greg falls asleep in class, we hear about Greg's dream. He dreams he can fly by doing swim strokes, which looks pretty weird. Greg prank calls a neighbor in a failed attempt to convince his dad he's not mature enough for military school. Greg convinces Dad to let him quit the swim team. The song at the school's Valentine's Day dance is changed from zippity-doo-dah to the hokey pokey. Fregley is homeschooled in the online version, so it's more of a surprise when he interrupts the dance. Greg's birthday is in February, and Uncle Joe's dog eats his birthday cake. In Book 4, Sweetie the dog eats the birthday cake during Greg's summer birthday. When Greg breaks Rowley's hand, he tells Rowley to lie and say he accidentally heard it on the car door. Mom overhears Greg scheming, and he gets in trouble. There is alcohol at Roderick's wild teenager party. At Roderick's party, he tries to impress some girls. He says he'll open the basement door and introduce them to the cute guy. Greg thinks Roderick's talking about me, but really, Roderick's talking about the dog. There are 2 more dog jokes that were not in Book 4. Sweetie gets way too friendly with Rowley, which makes Rowley feel uncomfortable. And Sweetie barges into the bathroom when Greg is using it. Mom and Dad make a scavenger hunt for Manny on Easter. One clue is under Greg's pillow. Greg is forcibly woken up when Manny rips the pillow out from under him. Greg does badly in the video game competition because the game has different colored enemies, but they're playing on a black and white TV. Leland wins the competition. Mom's name is Anne in the online book. She's Susan in the book series. When Greg tries calling his crush, Dad is impressed. He tells Greg about when he was first dating Mom, and he goes into way too much detail. Greg tries to impress his dad by sleeping without any blankets. Greg ends up making a blanket out of underwear, which is not impressive. Greg and Rowley are pranked into wearing their scout uniforms at school. Greg and Rowley get into a fight over the first letter of the word volleyball. The fight is interrupted by a random adult who wants directions. The other kids force them to continue the fight the next week. This fight is interrupted by a local bully, whereas in the book, the fight is interrupted by the teenagers from Halloween. Greg's distraction at the Smedley party is him failing to do a pull-up, then falling into a yellow jacket's nest. Those are all the major changes I noticed. I know it sounds like a lot, but keep in mind that the online version is over 1,000 pages long, so there's an awful lot more that did not get changed.